Thousands and thousands of books, I don't think I'm exaggerating, have been written by authors who have all been influenced, obviously, by this book, by Napoleon Hill. But you don't endorse all of them. You're selective, which I think is very understandable. Explain to me your thought, and what do you think Napoleon Hill would say about Ramy's story and about this book that Ramy wrote?
Well, he said someone will come along and even maybe improve his philosophy. But I think, I think it would feel the same way to me is, sure, somebody has done something. I use a quote in one of my books from Henry David Thoreau. The reason he didn't sit down to write a book, he hadn't stood up and lived. Now, Ramy could have wrote that book before he'd ever done anything. But as far as I'm concerned, it will make him a fraud. He said he'd all this stuff, and maybe I'm going to intend to do it or get around to it, or someday I'm going to do this. No, I'm not interested in that. It didn't work. What's your story? How did it turn out? You know, sit down and write something other when you've never done nothing would be like me trying to teach you how to play golf and I've never been on a course. You want to learn from somebody who's done something. Maybe if you hook up with a Tiger Woods or someone similar to that you can see their track record. If you want to become a good golfer, you want to get with someone who shows that they can do it. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, I think you're a fraud. You write after the fact that you've got a story to tell, and people love stories. People love stories, but I guess you can make up a story and you can fool a lot of people, but you can't fool the guy in the mirror. I would not write about finances if I had never had experience as a banker or had anything to do with investment. Mm-hmm. I would feel like a fraud. But a whole lot of people, I guess, they can live with themselves and thinking, if you're only making money by writing books and their own stuff on how to make money, mm-hmm. Kind of makes you stop and think what's a person's done.
Mr. Green, what do you make of that? The fact that he read this book when he was 12 years old. Changed his life forever, but it's not just his life, right? It's about all the lives that he's affected because he read this book when he was 12 years old. What do you make of that?
Well, we all read it at different times, and we grasp different things out of it. It's not that we change. Now, if he go back and read today, he would see something in there and say, "Oh yeah," and what have you. But evidently it had something. It may have been just a thinking that you get rich. If that's the only thing he grasped out of it. But I think he grasped something else, and that was the word action. Action appears in the book 77 times. That is no accident. Hill tells us in the second chapter under desire, 6 steps to riches. The first one, it asks, what do you want? I think Ramy got that. He knew what he wanted. He wrote it down. But the second one, it says, what do you intend to give to entitle you to what you're wanting? And Hill says, sad day when you start figuring something for nothing. In fact, one of my good friends used it on the back of a book by Thomas Jefferson said, the saddest day in your life is when you sit down and start figuring how you can get something for nothing. Mm-hmm. So Ramy had to trade something or another for the money. And there's only one way you can get money legitimate, that's sell something. It's either a product or your service. If you can sing, dance, tell jokes, write books, or whatever, if you've got a talent, someone's willing to pay you, or you develop a product that someone can do, you can make money.
You answered this a little bit, but maybe we can go deeper into it. What do you think separates Ramy's book from a lot of other books out there that maybe you have not endorsed?
Well, one is they don't have the history of accomplishment. You can read Copy, Think and Grow Rich, and a lot of people have. They practically word for word. I mean, they write stuff, and I can tell you what page it's on in Think and Grow Rich. And he's not done that. I think it's like I taught the course 12 times here at the University of Virginia, and I would tell the students, a 6th grader can understand it. And I think his book, Can You Really Think and Grow Rich? Of course, he answers it. The book would never been published if he didn't answer that question. Of course you can. And he's telling you not only how he did it, but how you can do it by doing certain things. And if he used one word, it's action. He didn't just read that and dream about it. And like he said, he wrote things down with us. I can recall giving a speech one time on goal setting, and a woman come up to me at the break and said, "Oh, I always have goals. I just don't write them down." I said, "We call it dreams." And, when it's written down, this is a contract. It says,
Right.
"This is what I'm going to do, and this is how I'm going to do it."
Napoleon Hill, if he was in this room right now, he just read Ramy's book, what do you think he would say?
Well, I think he'd say, "A job well done." It's 3 words. It always reminds me of the short speeches. Was Calvin Coolidge said, "Well, he's a silent cow if you know about him," but he said he wasn't known for talking. And one of his friends bet another friend he could get Cal to say more than 3 words. And he told him about it. He said, "I got him to argue with my buddy." And he said, "I couldn't get you in a conversation. I couldn't get you to say 3 words." And what he said was, he looked at him and said, "You lose." So I think you get the message across real short without going into it is, hey, this guy read the book at an early age. He doesn't just read it. See, the difference in it is, if you read a book, it's just a book. I read all kinds of stuff. I'm reading one now, so I love a story about a dog. But you read it, and you have to read the whole thing to know what happened. If it's a romance novel, did the girl get the boy to uncle leave him money, all this other stuff. But in this book, or you reading Ramy's book it's basically a how to do it book is. And you can take the book and you can have your own story, you can have your own ending, but you got to take what you learn from it. And not only that, you got to do something with it. You got to apply it. You can't sit there and read it. Well, sit around and dream, I want a new Ferrari, I want a convertible Rolls or whatever. You got to do something to earn it, because the prisons are full of people that try to get it without earning it. And that's your job is. And sometimes it doesn't work out. I mean, look at Edison attempts on the light bulb, changed the world, but it didn't work didn't work right off of them. And he only had one simple thing. All the ingredients of the light bulb was already there, except finding a filament that wouldn't burn out. They had to vacuum tube, and they had electric current, and they could put stuff to it and it would glow, sometimes a few minutes or whatever. And so he spent untold time, 10,000, he said, finding out what would put in that vacuum tube that would glow. And it changed the world, basically, the light bulb. But he kept doing it and doing it and doing it. And he said he didn't look at them as failures. It was things that didn't work. He tried film made out of something out of wood or different cloths and all this other different stuff. And he finally come up with something and other that he put together, and he could put in that tube, and he could put electricity to it, and it burned for a long time. Of course, we know now they keep perfecting it. There's light bulbs out there now will burn for years without burning out. But he lit up the world with that one thing.
If for all the people out there that have read Napoleon's book, if you had to fill in the blank and say, if you read Napoleon Hill's book, I want you to read Ramy's book because
it's proof that the material in Think and Grow Rich does work, and it's applicable today as it was in 1937. If you do certain things and you have persistence and have the belief that you can accomplish it, you're going to surprise yourself. Your wildest dreams can come true. And it's that plain and simple. But guess what? The biggest portion of any project that is out there is what? Starting. They're telling themselves someday, I'm going to take this. I'm going to go back to school when I get my bills paid down, or when the kids leave home. I'm going to start writing my book when that last one goes off to school or whatever. Which is a polite way of lying to ourselves. We have to say, this is what I'm going to do, and we have to put a date to it. Otherwise we're just dreaming, and that's what most people do. I don't even have a know. I've read figures that says 95% of the people who read a book don't get the benefit from it. Maybe they just enjoy it as a good read to know that Ramy has done this and done this and done this. But that's not the point in it. The point is taking this material that somebody did it, and this is what he learned, and this is what he applied. And if one person did it, if Courtney bakes a cake and show someone else how to do it. They might not do it the first time, but that don't mean they quit. If it worked for her, if they keep trying it until it's perfected, more than likely they can do it also. They may not do it on the same degree that someone else has done it or what Ramy's done, but I think they could surprise themselves at what they could accomplish, what's possible if they do the right things. But you can't sit and just think about it.
You have to act, of course. For some of the younger people that might be listening to this, I have to ask you this. You know, you mentioned some pretty prominent names of people that have been influenced by Napoleon Hill. For example, the late, great Michael Jackson, Kobe Bryant, the late Kobe Bryant. Can you talk a little bit about some of the prominent people that reach out to you, I would imagine, on a regular basis, people that are such huge fans of Napoleon Hill and been influenced, just maybe some names you could share with us?
Well, like the late Troy Cathy with Chick-fil-A, wonderful guy. I attended church with him, Sunday school. A teacher gave him Think and Courage in 1937.
Oh my gosh.
He's a suburb of Atlanta, and he had the idea of starting a restaurant, called it the Dwarf. It'd seat 10 people. And yeah, he read the book. He carried the book with him everywhere he went.
It worked.
And plus the Bible.
Yeah.
And yeah, it worked. And he come up with a chicken sandwich. And I had at least 2 or 3 newspapers call me. He died a few years ago. He was in his 90s. And he was worth $6.5 billion.
And how old was he when he read this book?
He was in high school in 1937.
Oh my gosh, wow.
16, 17 years old.
One of the wealthiest people on the planet.
He worth $6.5 billion, basically going from zero. But there's other people out there, you know, like Joe Dudley. You look up Dudley Products, just absolutely amazing. Considered retarded because of a speech impediment. He's been up here to speak. He reached out to me. I traveled with him. We visited lots of prisons and spoke. Cathy come up here and spoke to the students. I mean, this is a man, you know, with that kind of responsibility, come up here and talk to a bunch of students. These people are all unpaid. And just like Sharon Lecter wrote the Rich Dad, Poor Dad books, she wrote the first 14 of them. It sold about 35 million copies as co-author. And she read Think and Rich when she was 19. She graduated from Florida University of Florida and was a CPA. And she read the book, and she had the idea of the Rich Dad, Poor Dad book she wrote. Nobody wanted to publish it. She self-published it, put them in her car, and she'd go to restaurants or everywhere and speak, sell a few copies, whatever, go sell a few copies her. And then I think it was Time Warner got in touch with her and said, hey, we think we'd like to print that book. And so they actually came to her after being successful on her own of distributing the book, because she would go anywhere. So she's a fantastic story. Well, I hear from Steve Harvey that I haven't contacted him, but his attorney contacted his president of the film company, Gerald Washington. He contacted our attorney who lives in California about doing a project, which we couldn't do because it was the subject was already contracted out. But they say he's read the book 25 times.
Steve Harvey has.
Yeah.
Wow.
And what Billy Ray Cyrus, if you read his book, you know, the people in the entertainment business know Billy Ray. He devoted a chapter in his book on persistence. His book was given to him by Dr. Bailey because he stopped helping him fix his car. And Billy Ray had been thrown out of college for having dogs in his room. And he started a little band. He said $50 a night. But the thing he learned from reading Think and Roads with persistence, don't give up. You got this idea, stick with it. And of course, we know he come out of that song, Make You Break Your Heart. Yeah. And, you know, no doubt it's made billions and billions. And of course, he brought along little Miley. And we know Miley Cyrus, we know her story. Sure. But there's so many of them people. I mean, you know, just right over and over and over. Mick Romney, when he ran for president, I did not talk to him, but I talked to a guy that was, they're Mormons. I'm not a Mormon, but they're Mormons. And the boys go on a mission, or what you call it. And they went to France. And they call them, I think they call them advisor, in other words. And said he gave them a book. He gave them Think and Courage and told them, said, when y'all have time, y'all read this book and y'all discuss this book and you'll learn from it. And when he was out speaking, I said I never spoke to him, but I spoke to his room. I can't remember his name, but He's a dentist in Roanoke, Virginia, and I spoke to him on the phone because he mentioned Romney in a magazine article I read, and he said, you know, what the book did for him, and I kind of watched him in his campaign. He was saying a lot of things, and I'm thinking, yeah, I think I know where that come from.